at a depth previously believed to be entirely incompatible with biological motion or geological patterning, a zone of pressure so absolute it was thought to erase all trace of movement. A series of immense linear depressions imprinted into the sedimentary floor of an abyssal plain were recorded by an autonomous survey platform, returning sensor data from one of the least explored trench systems on Earth, and these depressions extended for several kilometers, forming a continuous chain of symmetrical impressions, each separated by a consistent interval, and exhibiting depth profiles far too uniform to be caused by random geological collapse, sediment slippage, or current-driven scouring, and the magnitude of the impressions suggested contact by an object or entity of extraordinary size, exerting force precisely and repeatedly along a controlled trajectory, something that should not have been able to move there at all. And this revelation, sudden, disquieting, undeniable, sparked immediate re-evaluation of long-held assumptions regarding the environmental thresholds beyond which structural motion, whether biological or mechanical, should be impossible due to immense hydrostatic pressure, near-zero thermal energy, and the absence of chemical gradients capable of sustaining metabolic or mechanical activity, a boundary humanity had drawn with great confidence, and which now lay broken in the dark. Initial assessments proposed that the tracks could be remnants of deep tectonic disturbances or mineral collapse patterns, comforting, familiar explanations, until sediment core analysis revealed sharp-edged displacement zones, inconsistent with passive geological processes and more aligned with active pressure application, implying a directed force repeatedly compressing and releasing sediment, as though something had physically traversed the seafloor in sequential intervals, step after step after step, and further examination of displacement geometry showed minimal lateral scatter, suggesting a downward force applied with remarkable precision, avoiding the diffuse distribution expected of geological weight transfer, and instead reflecting a patterned locomotion mechanism, deliberate, measured, almost methodical, not associated with known forms of movement in extreme depths. Such precision raised immediate questions, uncomfortable ones regarding how any structure capable of applying that level of force could exist, intact in an environment where the pressure exceeds levels that crush conventional biological frameworks and destabilize engineered materials. And sediment deformation analysis indicated that the impressions were created rapidly rather than gradually, revealing that whatever produced them moved with sufficient speed to prevent sediment backfill, yet slowly enough to allow clear formation of boundary contours. These speed indicators, paradoxical, almost contradictory, defied standard models of deep ocean locomotion, which predict that at such pressures, movement should be either impossible or severely restricted due to hydraulic resistance and near-total darkness, eliminating visual navigation capabilities. And when researchers reconstructed the impressions into three-dimensional models using sonar scatter patterns, they discovered that each depression followed a curvature, suggesting a limb structure or support appendage, contacting the surface with a surface area far exceeding that of the largest known benthic organisms, yet distributed in a way, implying internal structural reinforcement, rather than gelatinous or soft body composition. Sediment compaction layers indicated that the force applied was not gravitational collapse, but an active downward motion, consistent with locomotor pressure, wherein an appendage presses into the sediment, then retracts as the next one engages a cycle, a rhythm forming a sequence that in aggregate resembles walking or stepping, though on a scale dwarfing any biological footprint ever recorded. Researchers examining mineral distribution within the impressions detected microscopic fractures aligned in identical orientations across multiple depressions, suggesting that the producing structure possessed a rigid surface capable of transmitting high-frequency micro-vibrations through the sediment, as if each step hummed with internal resonance, implying some form of internal, stabilizing mechanism within the entity that created the trackway. And these micro-vibrations corresponded to frequency ranges detected in deep ocean anomalies previously attributed to tectonic micro-events, though now understood to possibly represent biological field interactions occurring far beyond the sensory range of traditional marine monitoring equipment. And when these frequencies were mapped onto the spatial arrangement of the tracks, a pattern emerged, subtle yet unmistakable, suggesting periodic resonance shifts, synchronized with each depression, indicating that the trackmaker may have been interacting with environmental fields in a coordinated manner during locomotion. This revelation led theorists to propose that the organism, if biological at all, may rely on mineral integrated structures akin to crystalline composites, capable of withstanding extreme pressure by distributing mechanical stress across rigid lattices, functioning simultaneously as anatomy and resonance channels. And such structures would enable locomotion by modulating internal field interactions, creating momentary rigidity during contact and controlled flexibility during retraction, an impossible gait rendered possible by physics itself, allowing movement through an environment lethal to most biological tissues. Further sediment imaging revealed no drag marks or lateral displacement consistent with fin or tail movement, suggesting that locomotion was achieved entirely through vertical compression cycles, executed with extraordinary stability, up, down, indicating that the trackmaker possessed a body plan optimized for deep pressure environments, where hydrodynamic motion is inefficient and energy must be conserved through direct surface contact. This type of movement contradicts all known marine locomotion models, yet, disturbingly, aligns with theoretical predictions for mineral-integrated organisms hypothesized in previous deep ocean anomaly studies. As researchers investigated potential explanations for the tracks, they ruled out submersible activity due to the absence of mechanical residue or metallic particulates, and the track pattern's curvature diverged from any artificial propulsion route, while the depths involved exceeded operational capacity for human-engineered vehicles, eliminating technology as a plausible cause and narrowing the mystery to an even sharper point. This elimination left only two possibilities, both unsettling in their own way. Either unknown geological behavior produced the impressions through a mechanism never before recorded, or a previously undiscovered form of life created them by traversing the seafloor in a manner that defies existing frameworks for biological viability in extreme environments. Yet, geological modeling revealed that no known tectonic process could produce regularly spaced depressions of consistent depth over such distances, nor imprint symmetric boundaries, lacking the chaotic features of geological collapse. And sediment reanalysis confirmed the presence of organic disturbed layers below each depression, faint, disrupted, undeniable, hinting that force had penetrated deeper than the top sediment strata, displacing biological matter and mineral sediment alike in a motion characteristic of limb pressure rather than geological fracture. This convergence of evidence overturned the long-standing belief that the deep abyssal plains are static environments devoid of activity, and instead suggested that they may host organisms capable of enormous physical presence, highly specialized adaptations, allowing them to navigate regions previously assumed impossible to inhabit, regions written off as dead. Further complicating the discovery was the detection of faint electromagnetic anomalies aligned with the trackway, exhibiting rhythmic pulses narrowing in amplitude at each depression location, a heartbeat spread across kilometers, implying that locomotion may be coupled with field modulation, allowing the organism to stabilize internal pressure gradients or communicate through field interactions as it moved. These anomalies matched no tectonic or hydrothermal signature recorded in the region, and their periodic alignment with the tracks suggested coordinated biological activity rather than random geophysical interference. As researchers pieced together the emerging picture, they began to theorize that the gigantic tracks represented the behavior of a species, evolved to live not within conventional biological niches, but within the pressure field, gradients of Earth's deepest trenches, using environmental forces as integral components of locomotion, sensory processing, and structural stability. Under this interpretation, the trackmaker may belong to a lineage of organisms whose anatomy merges biological and mineral components, forming hybridized frameworks capable of interacting with geophysical systems in ways that mimic geological processes while retaining biological agency and movement, a living fault line, walking. Such organisms would challenge nearly every assumption regarding the nature of life, expanding biological possibility into realms governed by physics previously thought incompatible with cellular existence. And as additional tracks were located, trailing off into regions of the trench too deep for current submersible technology to explore, the full scale of the phenomenon remained unknown, with the pathway disappearing into darkness, a line of footsteps vanishing into the void, leaving unanswered questions about the size, morphology, and purpose of the entity responsible. While initial estimates suggested a creature of unprecedented mass, later, analysis indicated that mass may be irrelevant if the organism's internal architecture distributes pressure and utilizes resonance to negate structural collapse, enabling immense structures to move without traditional biomechanical constraints. Rewriting the rules of what a body can be. This understanding reshaped the investigation, prompting scientists to consider whether deep ocean trenches may harbor a diverse biosphere, adapted to extreme geophysical conditions, where life emerges not through sunlight-driven ecosystems, but through mineral, chemical, and pressure-based processes capable of generating organisms whose existence has remained concealed simply because their signatures fall outside conventional detection methods. And, with this realization, the gigantic tracks become the first verifiable biological imprint of a hidden world, existing beyond the thresholds of classical life, a world in which structure, motion, and energy derive from planetary forces, and the footsteps imprinted into the abyssal floor become the silent evidence of a form of existence that humanity has only just begun to comprehend. As analysis deepens, researchers acknowledge that the implications stretch beyond biology, far beyond reaching into geophysics, planetary science, and the fundamental understanding of how life and environment may intertwine across scales vast enough to reshape scientific frameworks and open new fields of inquiry into the unseen realms of Earth's deepest and most enigmatic environments. As the analysis of the gigantic tracks advances beyond the initial discovery phase, and the first wave of shock begins to settle into a deeper, more disciplined awe, the investigation shifts from localized sediment study toward the broader environmental context in which such an anomaly could exist, and the data gathered from the abyssal plane begins to reveal a picture of an environment far more dynamic and structured than the long-standing assumption of inert, uniform darkness and crushing pressure. And the first significant clue arises from a detailed reconstruction of the trench's microtopography, which shows that the trackway follows a subtle gradient of density anomalies within the underlying crust. A hidden pathway, an invisible road suggesting that the entity responsible may have been moving along a corridor defined not by visible terrain features, but by variations in gravitational and pressure fields spanning the seafloor. This alignment is too precise to be coincidental, too perfect, too deliberate, as the tracks consistently remain within a narrow band where local crustal density deviates slightly from surrounding bedrock, indicating a region where energy propagation and mechanical stability differ from baseline abyssal conditions. And when this gradient is plotted against long-standing seismological records, researchers find that the trackway overlays a path where deep mantle waves tend to refract and attenuate, unusually a resonance tunnel beneath the world, suggesting that the corridor functions as a channel through which vibrational energy behaves differently than in the surrounding crust. This realization leads scientists to hypothesize that the unknown track maker may navigate along such corridors, using them as routes of least energetic resistance, thereby exploiting natural field structures that reduce locomotor cost and structural stress. A creature not simply moving through the planet, but moving with it. To test this hypothesis, computational models simulate the forces acting on a hypothetical organism moving along the trench floor with a mineral-integrated architecture, a living crystal, a resonant colossus, and the simulations reveal that following the density gradient reduces stress load significantly, allowing large structures to maintain integrity at depths that would otherwise exceed safe thresholds for even the most pressure-adapted materials. And this indicates that the tracks do not simply mark arbitrary movement, but trace an optimized route, chosen either instinctively or through evolved behavior, adapted to the geophysical layout of the trench environment. A kind of abyssal migration map, written into the crust itself. This insight transforms the trackway from passive evidence into a record of decision-making intentionality, suggesting that the entity possessed the capacity to detect and respond to nuanced physical gradients and align its movement path accordingly, implying a form of environmental awareness not reliant on light or conventional senses, but on direct perception of pressure, mass, and field variations across the surrounding space. Further support for this interpretation comes from detailed examination of microstructures within the sediment layers beneath each impression, where researchers identify graded compression patterns that differ slightly between the leading and trailing edges. Asymmetry, directionality, indicating that the contacting structure did not simply press downward uniformly, but applied force in a manner characteristic of controlled propulsion, with a forward vector rather than a purely vertical impact. And this asymmetry reveals that the entity used its immense weight as part of a directional locomotor system, converting downward pressure into forward motion through controlled release cycles in which the appendage compressed the isthmus. Sediment then shifted weight in a coordinated sequence, allowing movement without fin strokes or water displacement. A creature moving without motion, using the seafloor itself as the engine of its progress. This aligns with theoretical models describing how mineral-reinforced organisms might move in high-pressure environments by exploiting the near incompressibility of water and sediment to generate thrust through small, controlled deformations rather than rapid muscular contractions, meaning the organism is not swimming nor crawling, but resonating its way forward. And this would explain the absence of turbulence signatures in the surrounding water column. Despite the enormous scale of the trackway, an impossibly large entity moving almost silently, almost invisibly, through a world that should not allow such grace. As researchers apply high-resolution acoustic backscatter imaging to the track site, they identify faint residual structural changes within compacted sediment layers, forming subtle lens-like discontinuities in density, scars within scars that persist long after the passage of the track-making entity. These features behave as microwave guides, redirecting certain frequency bands of acoustic energy in preferred directions, suggesting that the passage of the organism permanently altered the acoustic properties of the seafloor, leaving behind not only physical impressions, but echoes that last decades, echoes that point the way. This discovery deepens speculation that the organism may not simply move through its environment, but actively reshape it as a side effect of its locomotion, carving corridors of altered physics, creating long-lasting structural and energetic traces that may influence other geological or biological processes within the trench. And when scientists cross-reference these microwave guide zones with historic hydroacoustic data, they find that regions coinciding with the trackway exhibit slightly elevated, low-frequency scattering noise, even decades before the track was discovered. A ghost signal, repeating, forgotten, implying that similar events may have occurred repeatedly over long periods. The trackway, captured by the survey platform, may not be unprecedented. It may simply be the latest. This suggests that the entity or its lineage may have traversed this route many times over geological timescales, carving and recarving not only the sediment, but the energetic architecture of the local environment, potentially using the modified seafloor as part of an environmental feedback system, aiding navigation, communication, or resonance alignment. And to probe this possibility further, researchers deploy temporary sensing arrays along the corridor capable of monitoring electromagnetic fluctuations, microseismic events, and pressure variances at extremely fine resolution instruments, listening for a footstep no human should ever expect to hear. Within weeks, the arrays begin recording faint rhythmic pulses, propagating along the same axis as the tracks, exhibiting a periodicity that does not correspond to known geological sources, and which remains confined within the corridor boundaries, as though guided, channeled, shepherded by the very structures left behind by previous passages. A signal, traveling through a living canyon, a whisper of something vast, returning. As the implications of the gigantic trackway deepen, and new theoretical frameworks emerge to explain how locomotion of such unprecedented scale could occur under crushing abyssal pressure, scientists increasingly recognize that the tracks may reflect not merely the biological characteristics of a single organism, but the operational behavior of an entire class of deep ocean entities whose existence has gone undetected due to the limitations of conventional marine observation and the extreme, inhospitable conditions that define their environment. And the global research collaborations established in response to the discovery begin compiling ultra-high-resolution temporal data on sediment dynamics, microseismic vibrations, and electromagnetic drift within trench corridors, attempting to construct a unified environmental profile capable of explaining the conditions under which such creatures might navigate and survive. In examining the long-term environmental records, a recurring feature begins to emerge: periodic fluctuations in deep ocean pressure gradients, aligning precisely with the orientation of several identified trackways, suggesting that the corridors are not only geological anomalies, but dynamic regions where ambient pressure oscillations periodically intensify and relax, forming conditions that might facilitate movement for organisms capable of synchronizing their stride cycles with these oscillations. And when these pressure cycles are modeled in 3 dimensions, they reveal wave patterns propagating through the seafloor in slow, repeating intervals generated by subtle mantle convection events far below the trench floor, and these wave patterns produce alternating windows of resistance and reduced resistance that shift across the substrate in predictable, temporal sequences. If the organism's locomotion synchronizes with these shifting pressure windows, its effective load distribution would be significantly improved, allowing movement with reduced internal strain and enabling locomotor patterns that would otherwise be impossible under constant, static pressure. This synchronized movement hypothesis gains traction when researchers discover faint but consistent microfissures located at the forward edge of several impressions, showing signs of stress consistent with downward pressure applied during a momentary drop in ambient field resistance, and these microfissures are absent in surrounding sediment, confirming that the trackmaker exerted force at specific phases of the pressure cycle. This means the creature timed its movement with precision measured in seconds, or even fractions of seconds, responding to pressure shifts invisible to most forms of life. The ability to perceive and respond to such faint signals implies that the organism possesses a hyper-specialized sensory system, likely mineral integrated, capable of interpreting geophysical data with accuracy, surpassing human instruments, and possibly utilizing crystalline matrices to detect minute changes in mechanical energy propagation. Such capability would not only enhance locomotion, but provide a foundation for navigation and environmental mapping in a habitat devoid of light, heat, or typical chemical gradients. As researchers compare the spacing and consistency of the impressions to the timing of local pressure oscillations, they find a near-perfect correlation, revealing that each step aligns with a crest or trough of a deep oscillatory cycle, suggesting that the organism's entire body plan is entrained to geophysical rhythms. Movement, then, is not merely motion, but resonance. This insight overturns the long-held assumption that locomotion in the deep ocean depends solely on muscular or mechanical power, introducing instead a paradigm where the organism functions as a biological resonator, harnessing environmental forces to assist in propulsion and minimize energetic expenditure. And as this concept gains acceptance, researchers begin applying complex resonance modeling to the trackway environment, revealing that certain frequency bands generated by mantle activity couple exceptionally well with vertical harmonic states that could induce controlled deformation in a crystalline biological structure. This would allow limbs to stiffen or relax in phase with geophysical waves, essentially enabling an organism to move by resonant entrainment rather than conventional biomechanical actuation, a being not walking against the world, but walking with it. This discovery leads scientists to speculate that the organism may be neither exclusively biological nor exclusively geological, but something hybrid, something occupying the liminal zone between matter and metabolism, a state of existence where living processes operate through mineral scaffolds, interacting intimately with geophysical energy flows. This hybrid interpretation is reinforced by isotopic anomalies detected within sediment layers beneath several impressions, where rare mineral assemblages appear to have been altered by exposure to high-frequency microvibrations, implying the presence of an internal resonance generator within the organism itself, capable of producing vibrational outputs strong enough to modify mineral lattice structures. And this suggests that locomotion may involve active modulation of internal frequency states, allowing the organism to tune itself to environmental conditions and maintain structural integrity during extreme pressure shifts effectively, using resonance as both a stabilizing mechanism and a navigational tool. In response to these findings, researchers initiate a comprehensive re-examination of deep ocean vibrational data collected over the past half-century and discover numerous low-frequency patterns previously classified as background noise, which now appear to exhibit harmonic signatures consistent with large crystalline structures moving slowly through trench systems. These signatures align with known migratory corridors inferred from trackway mapping, indicating that the organism, or others of its kind, may follow stable, long-term routes shaped by ancient mantle convection patterns, routes spanning hundreds, perhaps thousands of kilometers. And as this realization spreads, researchers begin to discuss the possibility that the organism is not an isolated evolutionary accident, but part of a large-scale biosystem embedded within Earth's interior dynamics, functioning as an intermediary layer between biology and geology, and potentially playing a crucial role in stabilizing trench environments by redistributing mechanical stresses through its movement. This interpretation gains further support from an unexpected discovery. Seafloor temperature differentials along the track corridor show subtle but consistent reductions, suggesting that the organism may act as a thermal sink, dissipating geothermal anomalies through interaction between its mineral frameworks and the surrounding environment. If such organisms exist in sufficient numbers, they may contribute significantly to long-term thermal regulation of deep ocean regions, preventing localized hotspots from destabilizing sediment layers or altering chemical gradients, essential for abyssal stability. This potential influence forces a re-evaluation of the deep ocean as an ecosystem, not a barren void but a dynamic environment where biological activity may be foundational to geological equilibrium. As researchers test the boundaries of this hypothesis, they uncover additional evidence in the form of acoustic shadow zones, aligned with the track corridor regions where sound propagation behaves abnormally, hinting that the organism's movement leaves behind persistent alterations in sediment density, capable of influencing acoustic fields long after it has passed. These alterations behave like environmental signatures, almost like markers, enabling organisms with similar physiology to detect and follow established corridors using resonance-based sensory pathways, a kind of navigation system, carved not deliberately, but as a natural byproduct of movement across geological timescales. If true, this implies the existence of multi-generational behavioral persistence, meaning these creatures may pass environmental knowledge forward, not through DNA, but through modifications imparted onto the environment itself, a form of ecological inheritance etched directly into the planet. And this possibility marks a dramatic departure from known biological inheritance models, offering an entirely new framework in which survival strategies propagate not through chemical information, but through structural changes in the Earth, leaving resonant pathways for future individuals to follow across millennia. As global research teams continue to refine their models of the resonant corridors and new data streams flood in from deep sensor arrays, the scientific understanding of the gigantic tracks shifts from isolated anomaly toward a systemic investigation of deep Earth biological, geophysical interactions. The trackmaker increasingly appears not as a singular biological curiosity, but as a manifestation of processes long hidden beneath the crushing darkness of the abyss, where the boundary between living systems and geological structures blurs into a continuum shaped by ancient planetary rhythms. High-fidelity sediment tomography begins revealing further complexities in the underlying strata, lens shape density variations, stratified compaction profiles, consistent with repeated traversal over geological timescales. This suggests that the pathway has been used by multiple organisms across epochs, and that the recently discovered tracks are only the newest inscription layered atop countless older ones. When these stratified profiles are analyzed for chemical transformations, scientists identify microcrystalline rearrangements in the sediment that cannot be attributed to pressure alone, instead reflecting exposure to vibrational harmonics within a narrow frequency band. These harmonics match signatures associated with the proposed mineral-integrated physiology of resonant organisms. This implies that the trackmaker emits or induces vibrational fields as part of its internal structural regulation or sensory processes, and that these fields leave lasting geological traces by subtly altering mineral grain alignment. Evidence that earlier sediment anomalies, long dismissed as geological oddities, may in fact represent ancient biological signatures preserved through resonance-induced lattice transformations. Reanalysis of archived sediment cores confirms this suspicion. Similar harmonic distortions appear around the world's trench systems, meaning the organism responsible for the gigantic tracks is not unique, but part of a globally distributed species complex adapted to the deepest geological depressions on Earth. Mapping the distribution of these distorted minerals reveals extensive linear patterns, mimicking migratory corridors extending for hundreds of kilometers. indicating movement on timescales far too long for direct scientific observation. The deep biosphere, once thought sparse, may be vast, and as researchers simulate long-term effects of repeated traversal, they find that organisms moving along deep corridors can gradually modify sediment microstructures, smoothing irregularities, aligning mineral grains, stabilizing density gradients, creating self-reinforcing pathways. Each pass strengthens the corridor for the next. This suggests the trench system is not simply a passive environment, but a co-created structure shaped jointly by geological forces and biological activity, forming a planetary network of resonant pathways optimized through millions of years of bio-geophysical feedback. A startling implication emerges. The tracks found today may be part of a long-distance migratory circuit spanning entire ocean basins. And when scientists analyze broader mantle wave patterns, they discover that the track corridor lies precisely at the intersection of several deep-field resonance nodes, regions where energy from crust-mantle interactions focuses into stable oscillatory zones. This is exactly the type of environment predicted for optimal locomotion of mineral-integrated organisms, an energetic highway hidden beneath the ocean. Further, these nodes exhibit oscillation rhythms, matching deep tidal cycles influenced by Earth-Moon-Sun gravitational interactions. It appears the organisms may use gravitational harmonics as part of their life cycle, migrating only during specific phases when resonance coherence peaks. Comparing track spacing with tidal maxima reveals a near-perfect match. The creature likely moved during a narrow window of enhanced energetic stability, suggesting it remains dormant or stationary outside favorable phases, emerging only when conditions align. This redefines assumptions about its behavior. The organism may spend years or centuries in low-motion states, relying on long geophysical cycles to activate locomotion, navigating between resource-rich or resonance-stable zones. Surrounding seafloor analysis shows faint parallel pathways buried beneath sediment, indicating multiple individuals or generations have traveled the same route. A multi-lane resonant highway deep beneath the ocean. Electromagnetic arrays strengthen this interpretation. They detect periodic fluctuations propagating along the corridor, faint, structured signals intensifying during predicted migration windows. These may represent communication or synchronization pulses, suggesting distributed behavioral coordination across immense distances. When the spectral distribution of these pulses is analyzed, researchers find harmonic modulations optimized for propagation through mineral substrates, meaning the creatures may use the Earth's crust itself as a communication medium, sending signals across tectonic plates. This would constitute the oldest and deepest communication system on the planet, one that predates human civilization by geological ages. And as scientists confront the scale of this discovery, they begin to understand that the tracks found on the abyssal plain represent the visible surface of a hidden biosphere, a world of colossal beings moving along resonant pathways carved into the planet itself, interacting with Earth's internal rhythms through migration, communication, and structural feedback. A world humanity has never seen, but which has always been there, shaping the deep. As the scale and implications of the gigantic trackways continue to expand beyond their initial geological confines, the multidisciplinary teams analyzing the phenomenon begin converging on a new overarching hypothesis, proposing that the trackmaker may be a keystone species within an extensive deep Earth biosystem, a biosystem whose interactions with geophysical cycles form an essential component of long-term planetary regulation. Evidence supporting this hypothesis grows steadily as researchers integrate seismic, electromagnetic, and sedimentary data sets, revealing not only the presence of the immense organism, but also large-scale synchronized patterns across multiple trench systems. These patterns reflect coordinated environmental modulation, occurring at depths where neither biological activity nor communication was previously thought possible. When global seismic records are filtered through resonance-based analytical frameworks specifically developed to detect anomalies associated with mineral biological locomotion, scientists identify repeating energy signatures, spanning entire ocean basins. These signatures echo in rhythmic intervals, consistent with slow, directed movement across mantle-coupled waveguides, suggesting that multiple organisms may migrate on cycles lasting years or even decades. This implies a distributed network of motion that stabilizes the deep ocean environment by redistributing stress and balancing crustal pressure. the organisms acting as living regulators embedded in the Earth's internal processes. These findings reveal that the organisms may occupy a role analogous to large surface herbivores or filter feeders species whose movement shapes entire ecosystems. Except here, the influence extends not to flora or fauna, but to the geophysical architecture of the deep Earth itself. Further investigation of sediment microstructures beneath the impressions shows uniform mineral realignment, too consistent to be random, indicating precise vibrational tuning imparted by the organism's internal resonance fields. These vibrations cause minerals to realign in ways that reduce internal sediment stress, potentially stabilizing regions prone to microfractures or collapse. This stabilizing effect appears to extend beyond the trackway itself. Adjacent corridor regions show reduced microseismic activity compared to similar trench environments, suggesting that the organism's movement creates zones of enhanced geological coherence, absorbing or redistributing vibrational energy. For decades, certain trench regions have exhibited unexplained seismic attenuation energy dissipating faster than models predict, and now these zones align with inferred migratory routes of the resonant species. This indicates that the organisms may have been contributing to deep Earth energy absorption far longer than humanity has been measuring seismic waves. As data accumulates, scientists begin to speculate that the resonant biosphere may have emerged early in Earth's history, during epochs when the planet's crust was thinner and mantle activity more intense, allowing mineral-integrated biological systems to evolve alongside the cooling planetary interior. Such organisms would have adapted to harness geophysical energy flows as a primary metabolic source, forming a lineage uniquely suited to conditions that would destroy conventional biochemistry. Their crystalline frameworks would serve as both structure and energy capture surfaces, storing mechanical or electromagnetic potential over long durations. This evolutionary pathway would explain the creatures' vast size and their ability to survive in environments devoid of sunlight or chemical nutrients. Their energy source being effectively limitless, drawn from constant mantle activity, pressure cycling, and vibrational gradients. If these organisms have existed for hundreds of millions of years, their influence on Earth's mineral distribution, trench stability, and tectonic processes may be profound. Certain mineral deposits, including rare earth elements, may owe their purity or arrangement not only to geological processes, but to repeated, resonance-driven biological activity. This hypothesis gains additional weight when researchers discover extremely pure mineral veins in deep ocean crust, exhibiting the same lattice distortions found beneath the track. Impressions suggesting that some mineral structures may have been shaped, refined, or even created by ancient biological resonance activity. Simultaneously, the investigation of electromagnetic anomalies at the track site reveals a previously unnoticed complexity. Faint repeating field modulations appear to be intentionally structured, not random noise, and propagate along the same pathways as the corridor's vibrational pulses. These modulations may represent communication or environmental probing behavior, possibly used by the organism to coordinate movement, assess structural conditions, or maintain internal resonance alignment. If so, then the deep Earth resonant species may possess the oldest continuous communication system on the planet, transmitting signals through the Earth's crust itself, using mineral conductivity and harmonic coupling to maintain population-wide coherence. This challenges fundamental assumptions about cognition and collective behavior. Such a species may exhibit distributed intelligence not centralized in neural tissues, but emerging from interactions with geophysical fields across vast distances and timescales. In this framework, the organism's movement is not merely locomotion, it is a planetary process, intertwined with the Earth's internal dynamics and contributing to the long-term stability of trench systems. As researchers assemble this emergent picture, they begin to understand the gigantic tracks found at impossible depth are not simply biological artifacts. They are part of the Earth's internal machinery, shaped by life forms that have existed undetected for geological ages, life forms whose activities may have been essential to the stability of the planet itself. As new deep field sensors continue to map the resonance corridors at unprecedented resolution, the emerging global dataset begins revealing structures of astonishing regularity underlying the trench systems, forming vast, interlinked patterns of energy propagation and density anomalies that mirror the inferred migratory pathways of the resonant organisms. These patterns do not resemble random geological heterogeneity. They resemble a lattice, a planet-spanning network shaped by both mantle dynamics and biological activity. As researchers analyze this lattice, they find that many corridors intersect at nodal points, where mantle flow convergence generates stable, long-lived oscillations, effectively forming energetic hubs that act as environmental attractors for large-scale biological movement. These hubs align with regions of historically low seismic volatility. This suggests that the repeated traversal of the organisms may enhance geological stability, smoothing out stress, absorbing destructive vibrations, and promoting harmonic distribution of mechanical energy. Detailed spectral analysis of microseismic activity near active corridors reveals that regions with high resonance pulse signatures exhibit smoother oscillation spectra than predicted. The chaotic spikes, typical of unstable crustal zones, are muted, replaced by harmonically consistent waveforms. The implication becomes unavoidable. The organisms function as dynamic stabilizers, adjusting their internal resonance states to counter abrupt environmental pressure changes, absorbing energy, dissipating it, and re-emitting it in stable harmonic distributions. This stabilization may not be intentional, but an emergent property of their physiology, a byproduct of mineral-integrated structures interacting with geophysical fields. Yet the cumulative effect across geological timescales is profound. Revisiting decades-old seismological mysteries, researchers identify multiple quiet zones, tectonically stressed regions that inexplicably remain stable. Many now correlate with the newly mapped resonance lattice, suggesting the creature's presence has influenced Earth's seismic history long before humans began measuring it. Sediment restructuring patterns reveal wave-shaped gradients extending far beyond the visible trackways, evidence of repeated traversal across millions of years. These ancient imprints show how continuous biological motion has subtly reorganized mineral layers in ways previously attributed solely to geophysical processes. This suggests that the resonant biosphere is not a recent emergence, but a system that may have existed since early Earth, co-evolving with tectonic and mantle dynamics, shaping trench architecture and sediment distribution through countless locomotor cycles. As researchers investigate even deeper, they examine Archean and Proterozoic geological strata for traces of resonance-induced mineral deformation. Preliminary findings reveal faint crystalline alignment patterns preserved in rocks billions of years old, patterns matching modern trackway signatures, suggesting the organism's presence extends back to Earth's earliest epochs. If confirmed, this would mean the deep, resonant biosphere predates surface life, potentially representing one of the planet's first evolutionary pathways. Such a lineage would have endured cataclysms that erased entire ecosystems, supercontinent cycles, global glaciations, asteroid impacts, surviving because it existed in a domain where the planet's interior rhythms offered stability. The creature's movement appears to follow periodicity, matching long-duration geodynamic cycles, mantle plume fluctuations and plate motion rhythms, cycles so slow they were once thought irrelevant to biology. Yet the organism's colossal size and crystalline architecture imply lifespans measured not in years but millennia, perhaps tens of millennia. Their life cycles may be synchronized with Earth itself. Chemical residues in deep sediment layers further support this idea. Metabolic byproducts exhibit isotopic signatures indicating processing times far exceeding conventional biological rates, pointing to metabolic pathways operating on geological timescales through slow vibrational induction and crystalline energy storage. This transforms the idea of metabolism from a rapid chemical cycle into a long-evolving energy integration process, inseparable from planetary forces. Gravitational measurements along the corridor reveal minute fluctuations consistent with a massive but internally dynamic structure capable of adjusting its density through mass cycling. This adaptation would allow the organism to navigate high-pressure environments by redistributing weight and minimizing internal stress. Computational simulations incorporating density cycling accurately reproduce the track depth, shape, and surrounding mineral deformation, suggesting the organism's internal architecture is not static but a fluid, crystalline mass system capable of shifting under resonance control. These insights imply that the creature's body is neither solid nor liquid but something between, a hybrid mineral fluid architecture adapted to extreme conditions through dynamic resonance-driven reconfiguration. In this context, the gigantic tracks become evidence of a being whose evolutionary history is intertwined with Earth's internal forces. a being whose colossal, slow movement has shaped deep geology invisibly, unrecognized until now. As the scientific community assembles this emergent picture of a hidden biosphere operating at planetary scale, they conclude that humanity has uncovered not just a new organism, but an entire dimension of life. Not life that opposes its environment, but life that is part of the environment, inseparable from the planet's deep machinery. And the abyssal tracks remain the clearest proof, yet silent, massive, precise, that beneath the ocean floor, ancient beings still move in harmony with Earth, sculpting its rhythms with every step through the darkness. As the Global Research Coalition integrates the final waves of high-resolution, seismic, electromagnetic, and sedimentary data into a unified planetary model describing the resonant deep Earth biosphere, the full magnitude of the discovery becomes undeniable, overwhelming, even for disciplines accustomed to dealing with vast timescales and planetary processes. It becomes clear that the gigantic tracks found at impossible depth represent the first tangible evidence of a vast, ancient and continuous biological system, one operating across the deepest layers of the ocean floor, in direct synchrony with the Earth's internal energetic architecture. The realization emerges that the organism responsible for the trackways is not an anomaly, not a one-of-a-kind colossus, but a member of a lineage that may predate the earliest known forms of surface life. A lineage that likely evolved within the mineral-rich, high-pressure geophysical crucible of the primordial Earth, at a time when the boundary between living system and geological structure had not yet fully diverged. In such an environment, adaptive strategies would not be based on organic tissue alone, but on crystalline frameworks, vibrational energy harvesting, and structural resonance. Early life may have emerged in two parallel domains, one biochemical, the other mineral-biological, deeply integrated into the planet's internal rhythms. And the resonant organisms walking the abyss today may be the last surviving descendants of that ancient branch. As the scientific consensus stabilizes, researchers conclude that the trackmaker's physiology cannot be understood through conventional biology. Its survival depends on a dynamic interplay of mineral matrices, internal resonance chambers, adaptive density cycling, and environmental field coupling, forming a living structure whose function emerges from continuous exchange with geophysical forces, rather than from metabolic processes alone. In this framework, the concept of life expands. Life becomes not merely chemistry, but the ability to integrate with ambient energy fields, whether generated by sunlight, chemical gradients, or, in this case, by the eternal pulse of Earth's mantle. The creature's locomotion reflects this integration. Each step is a synchronization between internal resonance cycles and external mantle wave rhythms, reducing resistance, optimizing mass distribution, and maintaining structural cohesion under pressures that would crush any known biological architecture. This resonance synchronized movement is not simply a method of travel, it is a mode of existence. Furthermore, researchers now recognize that this locomotion is essential to maintaining the resonance corridors themselves. These pathways remain coherent only through periodic traversal, which reinforces mineral alignment, restores vibrational integrity, and preserves the long-distance energy conductive properties critical for future migrations. Thus, the corridors are not merely used by the organisms, they are maintained by them, forming a biological, geological infrastructure embedded directly into the planet's crust. Across centuries and millennia, these colossal beings move through the darkness, sustaining the deep Earth environment by absorbing, dissipating, and redistributing mechanical and electromagnetic energy, smoothing out stress concentrations, stabilizing trench walls, and preventing catastrophic collapses. This reinterpretation reshapes the deep ocean from a static environment into a dynamic regulatory system, where invisible biological forces help maintain planetary equilibrium. Many long-standing geophysical anomalies, sudden losses of seismic energy, unexplained stability in high-pressure zones, anomalous mineral alignments now appear to be signatures of biological presence, overlooked only because humanity has lacked instruments sensitive enough to detect these faint harmonic distortions. With reprocessed seismic archives, researchers find resonant patterns extending as far back as early oceanographic recordings allow, implying that these organisms have moved beneath the trenches for as long as humans have been listening, and likely for millions of years before that. The resonant biosphere, therefore, may represent Earth's oldest surviving ecosystem, predating photosynthesis, predating complex multicellular life, perhaps predating the very crustal stability that made surface life possible. These organisms have endured through planetary upheavals, asteroid impacts, ocean acidification events, supercontinent cycles, persisting because their domain, the deep mantle crust interface, has remained stable across all of Earth's catastrophes. Their metabolism appears to operate on geological timescales, storing vibrational or electromagnetic energy within crystalline matrices for centuries, then releasing it during locomotion or structural adjustment cycles. This form of energy integration fundamentally differs from biochemical metabolism, transforming life into a slow, planetary-scale process more akin to tectonics than to ecology. Electromagnetic anomalies at the track sites reveal faint repeating patterns, not random, but structured, suggesting intentional field modulation. These signals likely propagate through mineral substrates, allowing communication across vast distances and synchronizing population-level behavior. If true, this would constitute the deepest, oldest communication network on Earth, a planetary chorus, resonating through rock and pressure, not air or water. The unified model concludes, the deep resonant organisms are not isolated. They form a network spanning multiple ocean basins. Their migrations are synchronized with mantle oscillations. Their movements actively stabilize Earth's interior structures. Their existence may have shaped the planet's evolution since its earliest history, and the gigantic tracks that first revealed their presence stand as the boundary between the known world and a hidden biological domain. A world older than continents, older than oceans. A world that has shaped the planet from beneath our feet since the dawn of geological time. The abyssal footprints are the first unmistakable message from this unseen realm, a record of beings who walk in darkness, in harmony with Earth's heartbeat, maintaining a stability no human civilization ever realized depended on their silent passage. As new deep-field sensor arrays expand coverage across multiple ocean basins, mapping resonance corridors with unparalleled clarity, the emerging global dataset begins to reveal something even more extraordinary. There is not just one track corridor, not two, but an entire planetary network of them, interlinked through predictable mantle wave pathways and density gradients. The discovery of a second major track corridor, thousands of kilometers from the first yet nearly identical in form, confirms what many researchers had begun to suspect. These trackways are part of a continuous chain extending across vast regions of the ocean floor, following deep mantle waveguides long dismissed as purely geophysical curiosities. When researchers overlay these corridors onto global tectonic and seismic maps, an unmistakable pattern emerges. The pathways align with mantle resonance pathways at harmonically linked nodes, as though the organisms navigate a coordinated grid of energy highways beneath the ocean. Further analysis reveals that resonance patterns along distant corridors fluctuate in synchrony, even across thousands of kilometers. The underlying geophysical processes are globally connected, and the organisms appear to exploit these coherent frequencies to maintain internal stability and environmental awareness, regardless of their location. This synchronization likely ensures population-wide entrainment to the same geodynamic cycles, allowing the species to migrate safely, avoid destabilized regions, and maintain biological cohesion, even when separated by entire ocean basins. Supporting evidence arrives in the form of low-frequency electromagnetic pulses detected simultaneously in multiple trench systems, pulses with harmonic ratios identical to those of resonance corridor signals. These pulses likely represent communication or environmental synchronization across immense distances, transmitted not through water, but directly through the crust, carried by mineral conductivity. If correct, the organisms operate within a communication medium, spanning tectonic plates, one of the largest biological networks on the planet. As researchers analyze these signals further, they uncover subtle periodicity patterns matching global mantle oscillations. This suggests that migrations may be coordinated on planetary timescales, occurring only when Earth's deep energy cycles reach certain peaks, enabling safe long-distance movement. In essence, the species may follow a planetary calendar, written not in seasons, but in the oscillations of Earth's interior. Geochemical residues within the new trackways add further confirmation. They exhibit isotopic traces identical to those at the original site, implying not only that the same species created both corridors, but that the organisms share a common global physiology finely tuned to trench environments. An unexpected discovery deepens the mystery even further. Adjacent to the main corridor lie a series of smaller depressions, parallel, shallower, yet structurally similar. Their depth and deformation patterns indicate contact by a significantly smaller organism, likely a juvenile or a different caste within the species. These smaller impressions show increased mineral deformation per unit area, suggesting higher energy density output relative to size, possibly reflecting growth-related resonance activity or corridor maintenance behavior. The presence of multiple track scales implies a complex life cycle, perhaps multi-staged, perhaps caste-based within a species capable of shaping planetary structures. Thermal readings near the second corridor reveal another anomaly. Regions beneath active corridors exhibit lower than expected thermal gradients, implying that organisms may act as thermal moderators, absorbing or redistributing geothermal energy through their crystalline frameworks. This effect appears cyclical, intensifying during periods predicted for migratory activity. If confirmed, this would mean the species has a direct influence on thermal stability within trench systems, preventing localized hotspots, reducing crustal weakening, and stabilizing geochemically volatile zones. Gravitational sensors detect faint mass distribution anomalies along the corridor, consistent with a massive, internally dynamic body capable of shifting density through cyclic resonance. These fluctuations match predictions for fluid crystalline internal architecture, allowing the organism to regulate pressure, density, and structural stress in real time. Computational simulations incorporating this adaptive density cycling produce track morphologies highly consistent with the observed impressions, reinforcing the idea that the creature's internal structure is a dynamic mineral fluid matrix rather than rigid anatomy. This adaptive architecture would allow the organism to adjust to environmental conditions with extreme precision, increasing density during resonance mismatch phases and decreasing it during locomotor phases, enabling movement in environments where static structures would collapse instantly. As researchers reflect on the implications, a profound realization takes hold. This species is not simply adapted to extreme conditions, it requires them. Its entire physiology is built upon the physics of deep pressure, mineral resonance, and mantle dynamics. It is not a visitor to the deep earth. It is native to it. This understanding leads to a radical re-evaluation of Earth's evolutionary history. If such creatures exist today, and if their signatures appear in ancient geological strata, then mineral biological life may have emerged alongside or even before biochemical life. Evolution, therefore, may have taken two paths, one based on chemistry, carbon, water, cells, another based on mineral matrices, resonance, pressure, crystalline physiology. And these two domains of life have coexisted for billions of years, largely unaware of each other, separated by pressure and physics rather than by distance. The gigantic tracks discovered in the abyss stand as the first undeniable bridge between these worlds, the first signs of beings whose existence challenges biology, geology, and the very definition of life itself. The more researchers uncover, the clearer it becomes. The deep Earth is not a dead zone, not a static void, but a living realm shaped by colossal organisms whose movements have silently sculpted the planet for ages. Beings who walk in darkness along corridors older than continents, moving in harmony with the pulse of the Earth. As the Global Research Coalition continues, expanding the deep field sensor network, pushing instrumentation into previously unreachable abyssal regions, the unified planetary model of the resonant biosphere becomes increasingly detailed, revealing patterns that extend far beyond anything scientists once imagined possible. It becomes clear that the enormous trackways are only the most visible aspect of a deeper phenomenon, a multi-layered structure of resonance corridors, nodal hubs and geophysical conduits forming an interconnected system beneath the ocean floor, one that appears to guide the movement of resonant organisms across thousands of kilometers. Sediment tomography, gravitational mapping, and electromagnetic field analysis all converge on a startling picture. The organisms do not merely travel through these corridors, they maintain them. Over millions of years, repeated traversal appears to have gradually optimized the structure of the pathways, reinforcing mineral alignments, smoothing density gradients, and preserving corridor coherence. This means the trench system itself is not a passive byproduct of tectonics, but a biogeophysical hybrid structure, shaped by the organism's presence, a living architecture evolving in tandem with Earth's deep interior. As the data accumulates, researchers begin discovering something even more striking: faint, but repeating patterns of harmonic resonance, distributed across entire ocean basins, patterns that show unmistakable signatures of population-level synchronization. Multiple deep ocean locations, separated by thousands of kilometers, display coordinated fluctuations. These modulations match those detected along known corridors and appear to intensify at regular intervals, suggesting the existence of species-wide migratory cycles. It becomes increasingly evident that these organisms do not act as isolated individuals but as nodes within a planet-scale network, a distributed biosystem capable of synchronizing through geophysical fields. The implications are enormous. If the organisms are entrained to mantle rhythms and if their resonant emissions feed back into tectonic processes, then their collective movement may serve as a stabilizing mechanism at temporal scales far beyond human comprehension. Unexpected support for this hypothesis arises when researchers examine long-term seismic datasets in regions adjacent to active corridors. They find consistent reductions in microseismic volatility, as though the presence of the organism smooths out chaotic tremors, absorbing destructive vibrational energy and releasing it in stable harmonic forms. This effect is subtle but widespread and persistent. The organisms seem to act as biological dampeners, redistributing mechanical energy in a way that reduces the likelihood of sudden crustal fractures or destabilizing tectonic slips. As researchers incorporate these interactions into evolutionary models, an extraordinary possibility begins to emerge. The resonant species may have coexisted with Earth's tectonic cycles since the planet's earliest eras, influencing the development of trench systems, stabilizing high-pressure zones, and perhaps even moderating the pace of tectonic plate motion. Such a role would mean that Earth's long-term geological stability, including the conditions that allowed surface life to flourish, may have been shaped, in part, by these unseen organisms moving silently in the abyss. Chemical analyses of sediment beneath the tracks further reinforce this idea. Researchers discover meticulously arranged patterns of metalloid isotopes, patterns indicative of exposure to precise electromagnetic fluctuations, matching resonance signatures associated with the organism's locomotion. This suggests that the creature generates controlled electromagnetic fields during movement, possibly to stabilize its internal crystalline structure, tune itself to environmental frequencies, or coordinate with other organisms across the network. Such a capability would transform its body into a multifunction resonator, storing, transmitting, and modulating energy as part of its physiology. Researchers hypothesize that the organism's internal structure consists of layered mineral matrices, each serving a distinct function. Some layers conduct electrical charge, others store mechanical energy, others modulate internal pressure or control mass distribution. This architecture would allow the organism to adapt dynamically to environmental shifts, becoming rigid when stability is required, flexible during resonance alignment, or semi-fluid during locomotor phases. The organism, in essence, may represent a living energy converter, a being whose metabolism, structure, and behavior are inseparable from geophysical forces. Such a concept forces a redefinition of life itself. Instead of being characterized solely by biochemical processes, life may also exist in forms where physics plays the dominant role, forms where organisms evolve, not through organic tissue, but through adaptive mineral frameworks, shaped by planetary energy cycles. As the magnitude of this realization settles over the scientific community, the gigantic trackway takes on new meaning. It is no longer simply evidence of a colossal creature, but the first clear signal of a hidden evolutionary domain, a biosphere that has persisted since the primordial Earth and remains active, vital, and deeply integrated into the planet's internal workings. This biosphere is not peripheral, it is not marginal, it is foundational. A stabilizing layer of life intertwined with plate tectonics, mantle convection, and deep Earth thermodynamics. And the tracks precise, massive, impossibly uniform, become the first readable text written by this hidden realm, a message carved into the abyssal floor by beings who move in synchrony with the Earth's heartbeat. a message humanity has only now, at last, developed the tools to perceive. As deep field sensors continue mapping previously inaccessible trench systems, the unified global dataset begins revealing structures of almost mathematical precision, a resonant lattice underlying the oceans themselves, shaped by both mantle flows and the persistent movements of colossal organisms across geological ages. This lattice, sprawling, interconnected, astonishingly stable, appears to function as a kind of planetary circulatory system. And within this system, the resonant organisms act as both travelers and maintainers, moving along ancient corridors that they themselves have reinforced over millions of years. Seismologists discover that mantle wave pathways beneath these corridors remain coherent far longer than predicted. Mineral physicists confirm that lattice-aligned stones exhibit microstructural tuning caused by repeated vibrational exposure. And geochemists find isotopic arrangements so precise they could only have been formed through persistent biological field interactions. Piece by piece, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. The deep resonant biosphere is not merely ancient, it is ongoing, active, planet-spanning, and the organisms that shape the gigantic tracks are not solitary anomalies, but integral components of a hidden evolutionary lineage intertwined with Earth's deepest processes. As scientists compare the newly discovered corridors with existing tectonic stress maps, one final revelation emerges, perhaps the most extraordinary of all. Regions containing the strongest resonance signatures consistently show reduced seismic instability. In other words, the creatures may help prevent catastrophic geological events. They absorb stress, redistribute vibrational energy, smooth out volatile regions, preserve structural coherence across vast tectonic boundaries. In doing so, they may have influenced the development of Earth's crust throughout its entire history, moderating destructive forces, stabilizing trench systems, and shaping the global environment in ways previously attributed solely to geology. This raises a profound implication. The stability that allowed surface life to evolve, to flourish, may have been supported, silently and invisibly, by these deep-dwelling organisms for billions of years. The creatures, in effect, are caretakers of the planet's internal balance, unseen custodians of Earth's geodynamic harmony. As the final wave of multidisciplinary reports concludes, the global scientific community arrives at a shared understanding. The resonant organisms predate surface life. Their physiology is a hybrid of mineral frameworks and biological processes. They migrate along mantle-field pathways spanning entire ocean basins. Their movements regulate stress distribution within Earth's crust. Their communication travels through the lithosphere itself, not water or air. Their presence has shaped trench systems across geological time. They represent an entire hidden biosphere, older than continents, and the gigantic tracks discovered on the abyssal plain are the first accessible sign, the first undeniable message from this unseen world. The final conclusion appears in the closing paragraph of the unified global report. The deep Earth is not a silent, dead domain. It is alive, inhabited by organisms whose evolution is inseparable from the planet's own internal dynamics. Their footsteps, once mistaken for geological anomalies, represent the oldest and most enduring biological processes on Earth. For the first time in human history, humanity understands that life exists not only in oceans, forests, and sunlight, but also in the crushing depths, embedded within the mantle's timeless rhythms. And the colossal steps imprinted into the abyss become the bridge between these realms, a written record of beings who walk in darkness, shaping the Earth with every movement, beings who remain unseen, but essential, ancient beyond comprehension, carrying out their silent work beneath the oceans. The discovery of the gigantic tracks does not solve the mystery. It opens a new era, an era in which the boundaries between biology and geology blur, an era in which life is recognized not as an isolated phenomenon, but as a planetary scale continuum. And somewhere, deep below, along a corridor older than mountains, the being that left those impossible footprints continues its slow, resonant journey, still moving, still guiding, still shaping the world from beneath.
We upload new videos every single day, so make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss what's next. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, it really helps the channel grow. Tell us in the comments what you'd like to see next. Your ideas might be in our next upload. Thank you so much for watching and for being part of our community. Stay tuned, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next video.